What's good, my fellow troops? My name is Xavvo and welcome back to a brand new video. So today I'm going to be giving you guys the best controller settings that I use on Black Ops 6. This is going to really help you improve across the mark. It's going to make your game actually look better. It's going to make your game feel better, and you're just going to play like a much better player overall. So I do really advise these settings, and I will obviously explain each setting that's actually important in a bit more detail for you, explaining how they work, and essentially just telling you which ones you will need depending on what kind of player you actually are. But yeah, so as you can see, we are right here in the firing range, and right now, as you can see, my movement is very fast. I've got actually really nice looking gameplay. It actually slightly pops more than your gameplay might look if you're using the standard, and also the aiming and everything I'm actually doing is very quick compared to like how it would have been before. Obviously, this is a controller video. For anyone who's on PC, these are not going to be the same because there is more intricate settings on PC compared to controller. So this is why I'm calling it a controller video. But obviously, take in mind, if you're on PlayStation, you will need to find your equivalent button, whatever that may be on your controller, and do the same thing as I'm doing with my Xbox controller. So the first thing we've got is the sensitivity. For horizontal, we're using a 6, and for vertical, we're using a 6. It's just fast, but it's not too fast, and it's also not too slow. This sensitivity has worked for me for years in Call of Duty, and I've not had to change it for this game, and it feels amazing. So you do want to have that on 6. For the button layout, we actually have it on tactical. I don't know why it says tactical flipped, but essentially you want to set that to tactical. What this is going to do is switch your B and your right stick, so that when you're basically going to melee, it will do B, and when it comes to the right stick, that will allow you to basically drop shots. So B with this setting is no longer going to make you crouch and prone. That's going to be your melee button. So that's essentially what that does for the most of it, and it actually significantly cuts the time down from moving your finger from this stick right here to the B. You don't have to spend more time moving your finger, or your thumb I should say. You actually save a little bit more time in game, and it also just makes it so that you can drop shots super fast, and the melee button is obviously easier to pull out because you're using the B button. So for controller vibration, you do actually want this off. This is going to just distract you. It does you no benefit having this on at all. Literally, you don't need to have the game vibrate because there's some in-game event happening, like someone firing a chopper gunner. Like if you're in charge of a chopper gunner or a bomb's landing on your game, you don't need that. It's not going to help you. If anything, it just distracts you more, so you want that off. Obviously here, lock conversion on foot, just leave that as standard. And then field of view, I do recommend 120. It not only looks better, but this actually helps you much more in game than you realize. Some people just think that, oh, field of view is a visual thing and it's just meant to make your game look cooler and extended, like the screen's more distant, but it actually has more purpose to it than that. The field of view is literally, as it says, a field of view, your vision. It allows you to see further around your head than someone who's locked in on 80 field of view as a standard. And if you're going in on 60 field of view, that's even fucking worse. You basically can't see people as well as somebody else who's using 120. And this is something, you know, we wanted for years on console, whilst PC were the only people who were able to use this in the past. So ever since we got it in Cold War, it's a great feature, and you should definitely be using it if you're not using it. And for audio, I'm just running 100, which is the master volume, and voice chat is on 50. You don't want to have your ears bursting the moment that one guy comes in and starts playing his shit music down the microphone, or, you know, that one guy comes in who's got like 10 generations of Indians in his house. Like, you don't want to be blowing your eardrums out to that. And there's some people with potato mics in this game, and it just sounds horrendous. So you do want to keep it on a pretty average level, I would say. Now, this bit is pretty cool. This is the color customization, and this is really going to change your game quite a bit. What I'm actually using is obviously default for all of these. You can switch them out. It doesn't really matter. Some people go for more exotic colors like pink for the enemy and stuff like that. But what we're actually looking at is the color filter. You want color filter 2 on, because what this actually does is, I'll just show you real quick actually. This is the normal one. So this is no filter. As you can see, the orange on the screen has gotten lesser, and the red and the green and all that look lesser as well. But if we go to color filter 2, everything just looks ever so more saturated and popping, and it makes your game look so vivid. It's so good. That is more of a preference thing, but genuinely, filter 2 makes your game look so much nicer. Target filter, you're just going to leave that on interface. I don't know if that's already what yours would have had, but you just put that on, and yeah, these should just be left the same. World color intensity, now, yeah, you could probably increase that even more. I don't really know how much of a difference that's going to make, but you don't want to make it like revoltingly colorful, so you're not going to need to switch those around. So that's the color customization. Now let's get to the actual controller settings for all of you on the controller. So stick layout preset, we're just using default. I don't really understand how anyone can use Southpaw or Legacy and stuff like that. It really significantly flips your controls around to the point where you're bending your fingers and other motions that you're not otherwise used to doing just to play the game. So definitely that's more of a preference thing, I would say. But anyway, now let's get to these. So simplified controls, you want that off. There's no reason you should want to have this on at all. It actually just makes everything so weird. Yeah, as you can see, ideal for players who are new to the FPS genre and want to learn gradually. It's definitely not worth it. For this, low motor strain preset off, bumper ping off, then you've got to put this one on. Now this is a very strange setting. I personally was kind of surprised why anybody would put this on, but what this one does is it swaps your left button and right button, or whatever that is on PlayStation. I think they just call it like left, I don't think they call it left bump or whatever they call it on PlayStation, but on console essentially it swaps your trigger and your buttons. And this sounds kind of weird because you're thinking like, but like the trigger is like automatically what people use to aim and to fire, and the buttons are what you use to throw your tacticals and lethals. But this is actually a very useful setting because it cuts down the amount of time that it takes you to move your finger to a trigger than it does to hit a button. And also with aiming, you actually have to hold the trigger all the way down to initiate ADS, and you have to hold it all the way down on the right trigger just to fire your gun. Whilst this, you only have to click the button and it will easily go into ADS, and hitting the right button as well, it's just click. Bam, you can fire your gun. And also because you're using your tacticals and lethals less than you are using your aiming and firing, I should hope, unless you're one of those degenerates that goes around throwing grenades every time they spawn. Like the average person isn't throwing lethals and grenades all the time, which kind of defeats the purpose of you having it as the quickest access button on your controller. You might as well set it to the triggers. So that actually does cut down a lot of time, and it's definitely good for people who are more experienced and want to have faster in-game input. But if you're not really one of those players, you're not skillful, then obviously you don't have to have that on. Now, dead zone inputs, this is very important. You don't want to skip over this for consoles. Guys, if you're using your controller, you want to have left stick minimum to 0, this to 100, this to 0, that one to 100 as well, and then left trigger and right trigger both to 0. These would have originally been on 10, all of these zeros, and essentially what dead zones do is it essentially affects how much you have to press on a button or an input on your controller for it to make an in-game movement. If I'm having to hold the right stick down quite a little bit just to get it to move, that would, you know, equate to having a higher dead zone input. Whilst if you have a lower dead zone input, you don't have to apply all this pressure just to move in the game. So it makes things a lot more quicker, more accurate, and it doesn't allow all this kind of stick drift that you'll usually experience with dead zones. If you have it way too low or way too high, it'll affect like how much you have to press or how little you have to press before stuff starts moving. So it really just makes everything accurate, and that is why these are the best ones you want to use here. Now, for the other part of the controller settings, we have the aiming settings. We're here on the sensitivity multiplier. You want all of those on 1. There's no reason to change those. And then for aiming advanced settings here, you just want to leave these all the same. But when you get to aim response curve type, you want to change this to dynamic. Essentially, this is very good for people who are, again, experienced and have been playing Call of Duty. They get the shtick, you know, they've played COD every year and they're not new to like the movement and everything like that. Obviously, if you've gone from a really slow Call of Duty to this game, which is quite a fast Call of Duty, you might find this a bit too sudden and a bit too extreme, so you might want to keep it on standard. And also, if you're like a new player to Call of Duty in general, you want to use standard. But essentially, the dynamic is going to allow it so that your movement doesn't feel slow and it has to pick up momentum. You'll basically be able to start immediately running fast. If I'm to go here and set this to standard, right, I'm just going to show you a little test inside of the firing range. This is how my movement's going to feel, right? It's going to sort of start off a little bit slow and then it kind of rolls in to being fast, which actually does kind of affect your gameplay a lot. Like if you're going into a gunfight and you're trying to initiate that movement and it's starting to slowly move before it picks up a bit more momentum, you won't really see it that much, but it does make a big effect. Whilst if you're using the other one, dynamic, you essentially can go straight into fast movement and it slows down to the point where you're actually coming to the aiming rate, which the aiming rate is more like where you're kind of initiating to ADS or to start firing. So this is just a lot more sudden, sharper, quicker, more responsive. It's definitely definitely better for experienced players. Target aim assist, you have to be a dumbass to not have this on. If you're on controller, take advantage of this. This is the PC player's worst nightmare. They absolutely hate controller players for this, and even though it doesn't legitimately make you an aiming god, it doesn't lock on to everyone like the PC players try to make you believe that it does, you don't have that much of an advantage over PC players. PC players have much more precise aim than you, so you do want the aim assist on so that you can actually compete against these complete sweats. All it does is essentially when you come towards a player, it kind of slightly assists in turning your gun towards the player. Essentially just doing exactly what it says, assisting you in aiming at the player. For movement, right, you're going to want to have this off, that off, crouch assist off. All of these, you want these off. These do not help. The assisting and all that stuff, it doesn't allow you to have full control over where you're moving, and it can mess with your in-game inputs. It's not good. For corner slicing, you do want this on, however. This makes things a little bit quicker because, as it says right here, simulates a corner slice by slightly inclining your weapon and camera when a corner is nearby. So this helps with the tactability. I guess tactability is not really a word, but where you're like trying to come around a wall, it has a slight little turn as you come to a corner, which allows for a little bit better peeking. This does help with some tacticalness, and it just looks nicer as well. For slide and dive behavior, you just want to have it on tap to slide. Auto door peek off. Automatic airborne mantle, you want this on. Yeah, most of these should probably be standard. I don't think you need to change any of these. For combat, you want ADS sight obviously on hold. You don't want it to just be like tapping and it stays ADS. Like, that's just dumb, because then you're not really holding ADS whenever you need to use the ADS. A lot of these, I don't think you'll need to change. These should already be your standard on console. Now, if we go back to graphics, here we have the eco mode preset. I personally have it on efficiency. It doesn't really matter too much. Gamma and brightness, you don't want that too bright and you don't want it too dark. So I think 50 is probably just a nice middle ground, really. Most people are using that. You can opt in for like 45 or maybe 55, but the thing is with these games, the more bright you go, it actually washes your game out. It's technically not brightness at all. They call it gamma / brightness because technically you're increasing the gamma. The gamma is what makes the game look more grey or more black, just washing it out, and it does sort of affect brightness, but not really as much as it says. It doesn't make the game look more visually appealing by having more brightness. It makes it look more dull and washed out. Don't do that. For the quality, world motion blur, weapon motion blur. Every one of these blur settings, turn them off. Depth of field, all of it messes with your vision. If you're moving and your gameplay starts to blur or the gun blurs, you actually can miss out a lot of details, like people at longer ranges, medium ranges. If you have this blur on, it genuinely does affect how well you can see where people are whilst you're doing the movement animations, and it does not help at all. Anyone who's experienced with COD will probably have these off already, but it's worth noting. Fidelity XCAS, you do want this on. I set it to a nice 70. It's not too sharp to the point where there's like lost quality and everything starts to look really grainy and super sharp to the point where it's like hurting your eyes, but you don't want it off either. This actually helps finely tune the graphics a little bit more, make it look a bit more visually appealing and popping, sharp and detailed, and yeah, it definitely helps as well in seeing where people are a bit better. And then on-demand texture streaming, you do want this on optimized. If you have it on minimal, your game's going to look like shit most of the time. Optimized means essentially it's downloading high quality game graphics essentially whilst you're playing, which yes, it might have a bit more of an effect maybe on your latency or your Wi-Fi, but I'm assuming most of you have at least some decent Wi-Fi to be playing Call of Duty. So now for view, motion reduction preset off. ADS field of view is affected. Weapon field of view default as well. I guess again, this one is kind of up to you. You could go with wide so the weapon's kind of smaller and more stretched out. Some people might do that if they're one of those TTV sweats, but that one's not important. All of these are fine. Some people do turn on inverted flashbang. Now this is a hit or miss. This can help if you're playing in the dark. If you have your lights off and you get hit with a flashbang, it can be so bright that it can hurt your eyes. It basically means when you get flashbang, the screen goes black instead of white. So it's a bit weird, but I can see why some people will use that. Audio, this is the final thing on here. Game music volume, I have it on 70, but you can turn it down to 0. It doesn't matter. The music doesn't help. It really doesn't. It just distracts you. It doesn't give you any more information about what's going on in the game apart from the end game part of the game where the final music starts playing because a match is about to end. That's the only time the music is actually useful. Other than that, it just adds more stress to your ears. You're just focusing more on music and other little micro thoughts, right? Instead of just focusing on the gameplay sounds and all that. So that one's debatable. I have it on 70, but for the sake of this video, we're going to turn it down to 60, and you guys can, you know, turn it off entirely if you want to. But yeah, most of these are fine. Treyarch mix, literally, you can change this. It depends what you're playing on. If you're playing with a headset, probably preferable to set it to whatever type type of headphones you have, maybe just headphones or bass boost ones. If you have headphones that do bass boost, if you haven't got them set up properly, it's either going to blow your ears out or it's not going to sound full. The audio is not going to sound full because it's playing from a headset setup, but it's coming through your speakers. You do want to, set that accordingly. Mono audio is absolutely dumb. Do not do that. It's going to affect which way you hear audio coming from. If you have headset on, you're probably wearing a headset for a reason. Maybe if you're just in a party, it could be just, you have it on so you can speak to people if you have a headset. But with the mono audio, what this actually does is it basically copies and pastes the same sound into both ears. It doesn't allow for the directional sound where if you're listening for footsteps, you can hear it's more on this side of your ear or that side of your ear. So it does affect your gameplay and hearing where footsteps are and gunfire, all that kind of thing. So do not put mono on. Leave that as stereo. That's what it should be as. It doesn't say that, but that's the opposite of mono. It's stereo. And yeah, all of these do not matter at all. You can reduce the tinnitus sound from flashbangs. That probably would save your ears, but I personally haven't done anything with that. That is generally it. Obviously, this is also the settings for the voice chat that I'm using. It's kind of just the standard. But yeah, that is the settings I use for Black Ops 6. This is probably the best ones you'll use in the game. This is quite a long one, but hopefully it helped you out. If it did, be sure to drop a like, leave me a comment. It helps with the algorithm, so why not? And yeah, check out all the links down below in the description. It's also greatly appreciated. But with that being said, thank you again, and I will catch you all in the next one. Bye, guys.